Hey friends, it's Hannah. This week I'm going to be redesigning my friend Asad's home office into a beautiful custom space. Asad's been working from home for 3 years, but he hasn't really put any effort into making his home office look any better. He's a lawyer, so he's really busy and doesn't really have time for it, so he recruited me. Now his style is more of a Japandi style, so we're going to be adding this really beautiful kind of style into his home. The biggest challenge in this space is that they have this random column that was put in by the builder, so we're going to make this actually a design feature. Let's go. We're gonna get started on hacking the Alex drawer. So I gotta head to Home Depot, get the trim, and then start cutting it, and then attaching it to the drawer fronts. I'm gonna measure and cut all my trim, and I'm gonna do it on a miter, which is just a 45-degree angle. I think that this just gives you a better finish when you put all the pieces together. Now, you can also do a straight cut. I think that you just get a better finish with a 45. So I'm gonna give you a quick tip so you don't have to flip the saw a million times to get the miter. So let's say this is our last piece, right? We just cut it here, okay? Now instead of flipping this like the saw, whatever it's called, blade, what you can do is flip this over, and now when you mark the next one, look, the angle is going in the same direction. This will be so much faster than having to like pull this back and forth. Today's an exciting day. I'm going to be getting all the cabinets ready for painting. So that means sanding, priming, and then painting. Do not try and paint your cabinets without doing the prep work. You will regret it because they will scratch. I'm going to start sanding all the surfaces. You always want to use your protective gear, especially a mask, because there is a lot of like dust and debris that will fly off. I'm going to use a pretty gritty sandpaper. So like you want to use something like a P60, P80, because we really want to scruff up the surface. We have to get all this like shiny stuff off so that our primer and our paint will stick to the drawer fronts. If you leave them like this, the paint will always chip. Next, we're gonna start adding the trim to the drawer fronts. So this will go all the way around. I'm gonna use a combination of wood glue and brad nailer. I love this little tool. It's like the greatest little tool that if you need a little bit of force, but you don't want, you know, your brad nailer, because it's got the absolute tiniest nails, and you don't even need to fill the hole. I'm going to go into some of these corners and edges and just fill some of these gaps. As you can see, some of them just need a bit of wood filler, and then we'll sand that down, and then we're ready for priming. Never ever paint any furniture without priming. The best primer to use is a shellac-based primer, so I use Bin, and it's never failed me. I've let the primer cure for about 24 hours. Ideally, you would let it cure for a little bit longer, but I just want to get moving. So I found these little brass knobs. I think they're going to be really cute in that space. And before we actually start painting these drawer fronts, there's like some just bubbles and stuff that came up. So I'm just going to sand it lightly to give it a smooth finish. I don't have any actual sandpaper, so I'm using this for my sander. So we'll just go in and lightly sand. One of the best ways to get that really smooth finish is to make sure that you are sanding your drawer fronts and furniture before you actually paint it, and then also sanding just a really light, like a P220 grit, between coats as well. I did a third coat, and I always talk about the third coat magic, and I think that's like where the beauty is. Just a quick tip, if you have to like leave your paint roller, wrap it up like this, put it in the fridge, and when you take it out, it's still moist, so you can use it for all your coats. It's time to put together the whole Alex unit, and I'm so excited to see how this green color comes together. I think it's gonna be just that perfect touch of like sophistication that we need in this office. I'm really excited to see this come together because Asad really needs some major organization in here. This is a little cabinet that the previous builder actually built in here, and it's kind of like a makeshift cabinet. We're gonna reuse this, but I'm going to add like a nice shaker style detailing to this. We also want to lower this a couple of inches because we want to move this down so that the whole desk kind of, flows together in one unit. Now that we've got that nook emptied out, I'm just cutting a few pieces of wood because I'm going to rebuild that up so that it matches the same height of the Alex drawer, since we want that continuous desk. Did you know you don't need to be an amazing furniture maker to build a cabinet? This is a really easy way to build a cabinet. You're basically just putting cleats inside the cabinet nook, and then we're going to actually put the shelf right on top of these cleats. Now the hardest part is really figuring out what's level in here, because this is an old house and I've never worked in an old house before. Here's how I built it so far. So we've got the cleats under the shelf, okay, holding the shelf up, okay. I did have to rebuild this a few times just because it was not level. And then this top part, we still have to install this, but this is basically a 2x4 and I attached a piece of trim here. Okay, we'll paint this out and caulk it and everything, but this is basically attached into the wall, and then these two are attached to this, so this is like the face frame. I have to add the same thing here, but I need to get my multi-tool and cut this trim off first. A multi-tool is a great little tool to use to cut off any type of trim without removing the entire baseboard. I salvaged the old door that was on the cabinet, and now I'm adding that same trim that I added to the IKEA Alex drawers. This is going to create that look of continuity, but I like that I'm just upcycling the door front because it was perfectly fine. It just needs a little bit of love. Now I'm using the same old hinges and just attaching them back into the frame, and we get to attach the cabinet door. And there you go, a little cabinet without actually having to build any furniture. I have to build out the tabletop. So the tabletop is actually going to go from here around this alcove. So I have to cut this nook out and then across here. I'm also going to be adding some supports on the wall for the tabletop. So it's going to be like this Alex drawer is one table leg, and then we're going to add cleats over here. Now, this is where it all starts to come together, and I'm a bit nervous because, as you know, the floors in here are not level. So we're just crossing our fingers that when I put the tabletop on, it all flows together, I hope. I'm at Home Depot and I'm in the lumber section, so I need to get 2 of these plywood sheets. They're like the 4x8s, and I've got all my measurements here too. So we're gonna get them to actually cut them down because there's no point in me trying to cut them down myself. Here's the thing, when we went to Home Depot, I was going to get the cheapest plywood until the associate there told me that they actually have nicer plywood like maple, and it only costs like $10 more. So that's what we went with instead. I'm going to start testing some colors for stain. Now we're going to use maple for the desktop, but then we're actually using pine for the slats. Pine is a bit more yellow, so we need to test and make sure we can get some colors that look like they're actually the same type of wood. Okay, so here's how the stains ended up looking, and you can see how different it is and why you need to test this. So like, for example, look, this is the provincial, and look how dark and like porous it was on the pine, right? So they just actually end up looking a lot different, like even special walnut. So I brought the samples into the room because I wanted to see it with the floor. The floors have a bit of orange undertone, and also the Alex unit, and that one over there. So we eliminated these right off the bat. It's just too light and there's not enough contrast. I personally actually liked this one because I felt like the contrast was the best. Farina didn't want to go too dark, so we actually landed with this one in the middle, which is provincial. Time to get this massive 8-foot desk cut out, and I'm a little bit nervous about the fit, but I did measure the space around the column a few times, so I'm crossing my fingers. Now, to also make sure we get this wood prepped, we need to condition it. So wood conditioner is really important to make sure that your stain sits nice and evenly. And I always like to use a rag when I'm using any type of stain because I feel like you can layer the stain a lot more slowly without the color getting too dark. We all know that plywood is basically just sheets of good glued together, right? So plywood always has this ugly edge. So what you can do is you can buy this edge banding and you basically just iron it right on top. And it comes in different wood finishes and it looks like wood. You can see we're laughing here, but I was so nervous to see how this would fit. And moment of truth. I'm like cringing because I measured this so many times and yet it just ended up not being a right fit and it's too big. I actually thought it might be too small. it's too big. So let me show you what we're dealing with. Okay, so here we have a nice tight fit. Okay, this nook ended up being really good. Here's about a 1/2 inch gap, which honestly is not too bad. Okay, again, but then this, I guess because the wall is not level, this ends up being a very big gap. So this is like 1 inch, which is just too bad. I didn't think the wall was going to be so crooked, so I'm just trying to adjust it a little bit by cutting it down. Now, if you're really good, you could have scribed this, but really what I should have done was made a template beforehand and then map that template to my wood. But here we go. The second try, the fit is a little bit better. There's still some gaps around the back, but I'm going to add a really cool trim so that we can just cover that up and forget that ever happened. To build up the desk, we need some type of support that's going to go underneath the desk. So imagine this is my desktop, right? You need something at the back to support it because you're only going to have like one set of cabinet drawers. Okay, the desk is like finally level. We inserted a cleat here. I just have to insert one in the back as well, and that's just gonna help distribute the weight of the desk. I'm gonna tackle the trim along this table. We decided not to scribe it, so instead I'm just gonna take a piece of trim and we're gonna trim this out. Okay, so these are the different types of trims we bought to see if we could cover up some of the gaps. Marina actually likes this one the best. So there was one that was like this, but a little bit thicker. And so she was saying, maybe we do that. And it's kind of like, almost like, you know, some type of interesting trim detailing because we don't have anything else in this space at all. We were gonna do a slat wall, but it's just, I think it's just not gonna work with the style that this is becoming now. So we're gonna try that instead. I got my trim, and honestly, this was a costly error. Each piece of trim was $40, so I ended up spending $80 more, which really stinks. After I stained it, the trim truly looked beautiful, and I decided not to glue it to the column because we already know the walls are crooked, so I glued it down to the desktop instead. Do I dare say that we are going to tackle the encasement here? So if you remember, there's this little shelf down here, cabinet, and the idea here for the design is that we're going to add wood on all 3 sides, so on both sides and the back, and then we're going to do some floating shelves. We always have to prep our wood before we can stain it, so I'm starting off by sanding with a P220 grit. Honestly, this maple is beautiful, but it'll just make it absorb the stain a little bit better, and then we're going to go ahead and wood condition this. Do I have hope that this encasement is going to go better than the desktop? Well, I sure hope so. Let's prep the wood the same way by sanding, staining, and adding the edge banding so this wood looks perfect. So there's a bit of wobble to this, and we think it's just because the walls are not level. So I'm gonna nail it. I'm gonna try to nail it all the way into the corners because that's where we're gonna do the side encasing too. Today I'm gonna tackle all the shelves. So we're gonna build a little template first, and we're gonna use that to cut all the shelves so we get a nice tight fit. So just to give you kind of a better idea, so Farina took strips from the dollar store of foam board, and then she actually cut them and glued them. And then she also labeled them so we knew which was the front and back. And she made 3 of these templates because every single shelf is actually a little bit different because of how janky this little encasement is. Remember, I had all these shelves cut down at the lumber store, but now I'm just shaving them down after I've traced the template onto them to make sure they're a nice tight fit. So I cut my spacers and I put them in here, and I put my shelf on top. So you can see it actually fits really well. Now I'm gonna be attaching these using shelf pins. So they're just like these. So this eliminates the need to, do pocket holes or anything. So after we drill the holes, then we just put the shelf pins right in. They just pop right into the hole. Here, let me show you. See, and there's the hole, and they just pop right into the hole. Honestly, guys, to tell you that I am pleased with the results of this so far is an understatement. Like, this looks so good and we're not even done yet. I'm so excited because we're here to do the last thing today, and it is installing the shelf. After that, this whole room is done and I just can't wait. Honestly, I've been working so hard in this room and I really stretch myself so much in my DIY skills, so I just can't wait to see it complete. I'm gonna install the shelf, and I'm actually gonna keep this continuous line going from here, and it's just gonna look a lot more aesthetic. So it's these small details that you need to think about to really like elevate your DIY to make it look more professional. I've got these really simple black brackets that the shelf is gonna sit on, so you can either put it this way or this way. We're gonna find the studs first and then let's get installed. We'll mark the holes for the screws, and then on the ones that there's no stud, I'll just use an anchor. Okay, so this is looking really good, but I think we can amp it up. I'm gonna take the same trim and I'm gonna attach it here just to give it a little bit more of that detailing. I really love how this wood is coming together in this room. So we'll just nail this right in. And I know there's a seam here, we just didn't have, I just didn't have all the right pieces. So we'll just put some type of like decorative something and make it look good. This home office was such a mess. I can't even believe Asad was working in here. But now it is a beautiful custom home office. I mean, isn't this what a grown-up's office should look like? My favorite part is definitely this wood encasement. It makes the office look so high-end, and I just love how it really adds so much organization and function to the space. And even that back trim, which we struggle with so much, it's such a design feature, and I'm so glad that that was like a happy mistake. I hope you love this DIY, and if you do, make sure you subscribe to my channel and let me know, what do you think about it?